And it was almost ironic, right? At first, I laughed at the idea of doing a piece of work on the outside of a Department of Community Justice building. And I mean, imagine that, right? And then I started thinking about it more, and I thought, like, what if we took over like a portion of the space, or what if we got to actually dictate a little bit about what was going on there? When the first call for artists came, what I heard about was this mural for the outside of the DCJ building.
The call was for a mural on the outside of a building that, while I could do as an artist, isn't what I do. And my interest in the project at all had everything to do with the nature of the call, of where it was going and who they were looking for. You know, BIPOC, formerly incarcerated peoples, please apply. And so we applied. And we didn't get it. But I mean, I think that is a really interesting part of the story, because we interviewed, and we kind of shared a little bit like we are now, though again, we were trying to talk about some of the things that we were talking about.
Without fitting into like their
Yeah, it was like, how does this become a mural?
Yeah.
You know? And the answer was, maybe it doesn't.
To me, Gallery Blue is about honoring the time spent in like positive endeavors behind bars. Like somebody saying, there may not be any program here for me, but I have my own program. And my program is to develop this skill. And when somebody does develop that skill and has something to say with it, like why not honor that? And why not see that person and be like, yup, I want that.
But essentially now it is 17 frames. Pending. 17 frames that we are able to show the work of currently and formerly incarcerated artists as a gallery in the space. But also thinking about the gallery as a museum, or the Department of Justice Center, community justice, parole, probation facility, in a lot of different facets. What it means to use that footprint for something else also.
For me, if I were to say what Gallery Blue is, and if I were to say it in the most strong language, it's a usurpation of this space. But it's also complementary to the space, and it is our attempt to start a conversation, change the conversation, and to change the entire environment of that place.
Everything about it had to be different. Every logistic that shaped how it fit into the space and what we were doing and why and what we were motivated by. And I think what Gallery Blue is maybe better, probably, for everyone. And so Gallery Blue has a permanent collection. It has these 17 frames, and each of the frames is the artwork of someone else who also is within the concept of Gallery Blue's primary curation mission. And through this process are able to kind of divvy up this plot of space we've been given access to, and provide to the furthest reaches of which would never have access to a gallery, to finances for commissioning the creation of new work. And, you know, they're in many instances, if they're behind bars, they're really coordinating through the phone how this is happening.
One thing Michael said early on when we were talking about even going into RAC, it's like, how do we create a space at the table, right? How do people who already have like a connection within the art world create space where somebody who doesn't, which is kind of me, right, to show up and be like, hey, look, I do this thing. Like even grant writing, like to fill out some of that grant stuff online is a nightmare. I don't have a good CV. Like I didn't go through a master's in art. I don't have some of those tools where I just plug it in. It's difficult. To me, figuring out like what somebody can view on those walls and may, on whether it's a very conscious level or on a subconscious level, change that experience was the point.
So in addition to the frames that make Gallery Blue, Blue themselves was able to produce a whole multiple new bodies of work.
I created a group of pieces that I named Inside Alliance after a group that goes in and teaches people about sort of like how we experience the world from the inside out, and super impactful. They're doing even now some diversion stuff in drug court, but they work in McLaren and various other correctional facilities. So I created these pieces, the largest of which is an 8-foot phoenix. There are 6 of them, and each one is Baltic birch cut out to shape, acrylic paint, and mixed media. The mixed media includes pages from books that were either written about or by wrongfully convicted people. And this is an issue that is really important to me. It's something I'm intimately familiar with and is much larger than me at the same time. And I think the breadth of those works encompasses people who have had that experience and transcended it in beautiful ways, and others who, even through, like Steve Biko, even through his death, has been like a voice, and of course his life as well. And these are just a few stories that are the tip of the iceberg for so many more. But I cut and pasted and sat with these pieces for a long time, and created some really, I think, some neat stuff, coated in resin. So the Phoenix is the largest of the pieces. I had to cut out 3 pieces of plywood to actually make it, so it's quite large. It goes all the way from the floor to the ceiling, and has a large span, over 8 feet. And in that piece, I used the pages from Brian Stevenson's book, and he is a lawyer who has gotten over 40 people off death row. So I pasted them in there, and they're in the parole and probation office, and all these things are in the parole and probation office, and people are going to walk by, and some of them are going to be parole officers, and they're going to see it, and they're going to feel it, and maybe it's going to make sense to them, and maybe it isn't, and maybe it's going to matter, and maybe it isn't, but it's there, and it's real, and it's like a commentary, and it is energetically subversive, but it's also beautiful, I think, and that's the idea, is to have that conversation, and sometimes even just influence on a subconscious level. So the sacred geometry became important to me in terms of my larger sort of concept of life. But sacred geometry is kind of about this like underlying plan, right? It's like this underlying design, this thing that just is, it exists, and you can't see it every day. You don't look at a nautilus and know that it's like this Fibonacci series. You don't see all of it. Maybe every once in a while a snowflake or something, but I created these pieces to give a person who is in the midst of their experience of life that looks like it has no plan, that looks like it has no design, that looks like, what is happening to me? Where am I going? What am I doing? Like maybe just they walk by that and they have like this feeling like, wait a second. And 2 of the sacred geometry pieces I left unfinished. And I haven't seen anybody do that, so I'm kind of proud of that choice. But within that, my idea was that even if you know there's a plan, like a lot of people, because of faith or other things, they say to themselves, I get it, there's a plan for me. But along with that is like, I have no idea what it is, right? So leaving those unfinished was like, all right, there's something about this, you know? And so that was the sort of impetus behind that, is that there is a plan, you may not know what it is, it may not even be clear to you, but it's going to work itself out. One of the things that we've joked about is we could have gone in there in 2 weeks and painted a mural down one hall, and probably Rack and the DCJ would be like, hey, all right. And then they would have made frames and put stuff in the frames, and we would have been gone, and we'd take our 15 grand and be like, all right, let's go have a party, you know, let's do a thing, right? Well, we chose not to do that, and partly our choice was to influence as many different portions of that building as possible. Like, how do we get work everywhere? They have these meeting rooms, which are the places where the people on parole will actually meet with the parole officers, and we just thought we need to get in there, and how do we do that? So we decided to take the large inside Alliance pieces, these kind of like avatars with the wrongfully convicted human beings' words in them. And we took pictures and we actually created some stickers using those pieces. So we created 8 stickers. They're kind of unified by the format of them, and you'll see in the pictures that they all have kind of like this circle around them with some of my brush strokes incorporated. And then Michael and I went in there and put up giant, 30-inch stickers, our first time ever doing that. A lot of these things were firsts. So yeah, we just wanted to have an influence even in that space. So when you're meeting with that parole officer, right there on the wall, there's this thing that has this connection to the overall feel, but also this connection to something else that's going on.
In addition to the permanent collection, we made these frames out of reclaimed wood from a local church on MLK. We finished only 3 sides of this wood, and so the original patina for these frames would be, present, commanding, and juxtaposed with the work, right? Which is each individual artist's original thought, idea, expression, another person like Blue, like myself, being represented.
What's it mean to like empower like an artist totally? Like, or what's it mean to like give over that control like to us, like really who are disempowered in many ways, right? Like, so how do you take people who are marginalized and give them this power? And those frames, the things that Michael talked about us preserving, these imperfections, the way that they've been beat up, the way that they've gone through stuff, these are not the things that make them undesirable. They're the things that make them beautiful. And that's the idea, is that the frame even embodies the individuals who we're supporting, is that you can go through stuff, you can get beat up by life, you can have these scars and holes and things that somebody looks, oh, that doesn't look finished. Well, they're beautiful. They're undeniably beautiful. When somebody looks at these frames now with the work in them, they're like a standalone, for me, piece of art. One of the artists that is represented, M. Lawrence, really when I was learning to work with colored pencils, this was like my teacher. Like, he worked with me as an artist in acrylic paints and in colored pencil work, which I became, pretty accomplished with. And when I approached him about being a part of this project, he'd been out of prison under a year, but still quite a while, 6 or 8 months. And he had said that he didn't have time for art. This guy's an artist. This guy's incredible, and if you see his work in the DCJ, it's brilliant. And I think that's also this idea that we're kind of trying to support. I've heard people coming out of the criminal justice system who spent hours and years perfecting artistic sort of abilities, and then they get out and they work a minimum wage job, and they do something that's not fulfilling and not representative of who they are as a human being and as a person and part of their self-expression. So to have him in there and for him to actually create this piece, it's a big deal. Like, there's no reason why that guy shouldn't be making art.
When I started going into prisons, I became committed to that frontier of the human struggle. And so, but I don't think all of those things happen behind the fence, and I don't think that issue can be seen in all the ways that it can be seen. Marginalizations are marginalizations partially because of their invisibility. There was compensation for production of new work. But also one of the things that we didn't want to do is just get work and frame it. We wanted them to produce new work. Like, part of it was the challenge. Like, part of it was putting a carrot in which they could chase, but it was all carrot, and they could bite it if they were hungry for it, you know what I mean? And some guys didn't make it. Some guys really struggled to get through, and some are no longer with us. It was a poem, actually, and so we are able to fill a frame with this person's work. He overdosed before we even had frames on the wall, and this is not an unfamiliar issue. In this instance, tending to this looks like being an artist, producing opportunities for artists, and making sure that there's resources for them to do this. But it was important for us to be able to take part in being able to do and provide.
First of all, we reach out to a bunch of artists. Sometimes we were referred to artists, and there were usually artists we'd already contacted. I have a few artists who are at Oregon State Prison. I have a contact in there who actually communicates with them for me. And I think one of the difficulties is we don't think of creating art as a luxury, right? But really it is, right? And in a lot of ways, even if it is like the thing that keeps us sort of healthy or sane sometimes. I know more people who have gotten out and died. And it sounds unreal to me to say that. I know more people who have gotten out and died than people who have gotten out and lived. And it's just life happening, but some of it is overdose. And it's intense. I don't think that's something that people know. The struggles with just like getting the art out of OSP, there's two pieces. One is done, one is maybe almost done, and even you cannot go in there, right? So the only way that it's gonna get out is that it's gonna be left at property, and I'm gonna go pick it up, and that's how it's gonna get out. So that's a struggle, and then I have other artists who just don't have the capacity to complete work on the outside. Michael and I are not trying to control what this art is, right? We're not trying to be a gatekeeper of, is this the best piece of work this person's ever completed? Does this meet some external idea of what something that goes in a gallery should be or should look like? What we're doing is we're saying, give us your experience. Put your experience on this piece of paper that we've provided, and no matter what that is, we're going to put it up.
To really kind of pin where does the work come from and how does it get there, like blood, sweat, and tears, and no profit, and heart and soul and meditation, and the good graces of people in our lives who care about us enough to stick around even though we're splitting our beam in a lot of different directions.
I just think it's important, if we think about the monetary aspect of this, these guys are real artists. They may not have MFAs, but they have years. I call it prison savants, because you have guys in there that will kill you in chess because they played 50 games a day for 20 years. There's people with extraordinary abilities.
Which, if Gallery Blue is able to get more resources, it allows for more of these crazy and complicated stories. Like, people are like, oh, wow. And I'm like, you can do this. Our relationship started with lunch. And we just kept having lunch. And people might see us and say, those guys are extraordinary. And it's like, you too can be extraordinary. This is us. Unassured. We have created a platform in which someone who's incarcerated, maybe for some sentence that will outlast them, but they are nurturing a skill that they are trading master artworks for shots of coffee and a birthday card for their son.
People coming out can be seen in a way, and that may not be a reflection of who they really are. But I think that's sort of what I would want on two levels. One is for people to see that these are extraordinary people, that the system is doing harm.
Now, why Portland? Why is this special here? How did this happen? And why should an average person care? Incarceration is in your backyard. This issue affects literally everyone in this country and outside of this world. It's an inhumane practice. We're not doing it well. We don't legislate it well. There's all kinds of problems about it. It is akin to slavery. I am a black artist. There's all this stuff that also can be seen if you start looking at the frames and you see what's going on. You can walk in to Gallery Blue and get that.
Portland wants to welcome people back. That's who we are. But the system in Oregon is not as progressive as we'd like to believe.
But let me be clear, I do intend to be threatening to the system, because the system itself is not helping.
Portland believes in this stuff, but people don't always know about it.
If there was an iceberg and the top of it was being able to see an artwork, the bottom of it is a bunch of people hopefully getting free or being held within the community. Gallery Blue is an artwork that has artworks as part of that artwork. And then the other part of that is, if anything I'm saying sounds interesting, you too can have this. It took me getting the right shoes and sewing holes in my pants into the prison, and all of this came from doing that on a consistent basis. And that could be at your local soup kitchen, it could be wherever. You might, in an old folks home. And so I want people to see that the things that we're doing are only extraordinary because we are doing them, not because they are unto themselves extraordinary.
I think when you're going into the parole and probation office, I think especially coming out of prison and fresh back into society, I mean, there's so many things that are difficult. Going into a parole and probation office, I think for most people, is damaging. It's re-traumatization, and it's a place where the power dynamics are strong, and the power is all in one group's hands, to the point that your freedom can actually be taken away, or you can be told, don't go here, don't go there, don't do this, don't do that, or else. And what's that feel like, right? What's that feel like for somebody who's gone through their entire time, or a bunch of time, and has probation and has to then answer to somebody, and maybe doing everything right, or maybe not, maybe struggling in life just like everybody struggles, right? I follow every rule, and I was at the point where I was like, maybe I don't even want to keep going. Like, that's how bad this system was to me. Like to a level of hopelessness and struggle. And I have tools that other people don't have. Like, I have abilities that some people don't have, and that's where I was at, following every rule to the T. This big project, you know, it was really hard. I got to create some really cool work that was like, came from within me, that speaks to a lot of my artistic sensibilities and also has depth to it. Hopefully for me, it was a starting point for building on my career as an artist. I've built a lot of skills, and I want to put them into practice in a real way. I think that the pieces that I put in to the parole and probation office are impactful. I think that people view them and they feel a certain way, which I think is the most important thing. I want to create more of that stuff that kind of speaks from sort of my heart and my mind, and have people connect with the stuff that I do. So I see this as a really cool opportunity that I had, a difficult project, but a rewarding one. Even though if you look at this work, you're going to be like, wow, that person is extraordinary. These are just examples of people who have extraordinary gifts and abilities from behind bars. These are humans. And that's what I want people to do, is be open to the world where they are amazed